There are some sacred groves still persisting, but if you ask the local people, you can map the landscape in terms of the names which they use to designate the various elements of landscape in their own locality. So this we did an exercise. This is 5 km by 5 km, a 25 square kilometer area in Siddhapur Taluka of Uttar Kannada. And the areas which I have shown in black here, the place names are Kanu, and Kanu means a sacred grove in Kannada. So you can, although only on parts of that today, or even sacred groves persist, you can try to reconstruct the historical landscape. And using many such techniques, you can understand the history. Another very interesting place, area of the country where you can see, in a sense, history in operation is Northeast India. There are parts of Northeast India where commercialization, modern technology, modern influences reached only in 1950s. So one such is the Churachandpur district. It's a hill district of Manipur, or not far from the Myanmar, China. In fact, on one side Myanmar, on one side China, and Manipur, they are fairly not too far from Churachandpur. And this area had essentially the traditional hunter-gatherer shifting cultivator society of Kukis persisting till 1950s. And in the 1950s, roads came in, and along with the roads came in a new religion. All the people embraced Christianity, and just like I was talking about earlier in Germany, the Christian priests said that sacred grove, this is a pagan practice and it has to be destroyed. And all sacred groves were felled. As a result, in 1960s, there were widespread fires which burned down several villages. And the people concluded that the sacred groves were serving a very important function as a fire break, and decided in at least some of the villages to reinstate the sacred groves. Now this, I was asked to talk on various issues, debates. So one of the debates indeed in literature about sacred groves is, did it serve any function? Did these traditional conservations have any positive social function, and whether people understood such a function? There is one school of thought which says that no, these are all irrational religious practices. They have no positive function. If some positive effect is seen, it is incidental. It cannot be construed that the practices came into being for this positive effect. As I said, this is a very strong school, and rationalists so-called, they believe that you have to condemn all these practices. In fact, at one point some years ago, I was elected president of Marathi Vigyan Parishad, and I gave a talk on sacred groves and its ecological relevance. And the Maharashtra Rationalist Association passed a resolution condemning the Marathi Vigyan Parishad and condemning me for supporting even incidentally such irrational practices. So as I said, there is this school. But the history of Churachandpur, one of my students who was from Manipur, he did a PhD thesis on this, interested me and him very much because, as I said, after the sacred groves were all destroyed, several villages reinstated them, noting for themselves that it had a positive function as fire breaks and perhaps some other functions for supply of bamboo, which is their important construction material. But when they reinstated these practices, they did not call them sacred groves, because of course under the new religion you cannot talk of sacred groves. So there in the Manipuri, not Manipuri actually, it's language called Gangte. In the Gangte language what they are calling it is safety forest, not sacred forest. And then others which are called supply forests, again, not as earlier sacred forests. So there is clearly at least seen evidence that people realize the secular, non-religious function of these practices and reinstated them. Okay. So this in the background is in fact the reinstated sacred graph, where I had spent a few very interesting days. So I became interested in trying to see how such a practice could have, as a rational practice, could have evolved. And in fact, I have a background. I am very interested in mathematical ecology. I did a PhD thesis in mathematical ecology. So I don't want to go into detail, but we did some models, mathematical models of how people may evolve conservation practices. And we said that why will people decide to conserve if they see that their current harvesting practices are leading to a depletion of the yield, then they may change their practices. So you can set up some rational rules. As I said, I don't want to go into detail, but we have a paper in theoretical population biology on this model. And you can show that the ordinary rational rule, which says that if you see a decline in harvest, you reduce harvesting effort, but if you see an improvement in harvest, you step up harvesting effort, will inevitably lead to wipeout of the resource. But if you couple change in the harvesting effort with maintenance of a refugium, you decide that you keep some area apart and you follow again what would appear to be a very simple rational rule. That is, if you see a decline in harvest, you reduce harvesting effort, but along with that you increase the size of protected area. If you see a better harvesting effort, then maybe you increase the harvesting effort in the same direction and reduce the refugium size. So it seems a very rational way of doing it. Under that circumstances, unlike here, where there is without such a protected area, inevitably a complete wipeout of the resource, you have a stable situation generated where you have portion of the resource is completely protected, other portion is used in a fashion which adjusts the level of harvest. And this is, I think, what had happened all over the world. In fact, all the historical evidence says, as I said, at least in Europe, Africa, and all of Asia, there were such systems of sacred grounds in the earlier times before, in particular, the spread of Islam and Christianity. Now, therefore, as I said, there is very good reason to at least propound that these practices, though they may have been couched, and they indeed were couched in religious terms, had rational origins, and in fact people see the function and revive it. So I want to offer a kind of a summary of what one sees as such practices at different stages of technological development. The anthropologists talk of horticultural societies as those which are engaged in shifting cultivations, or very simple primitive agriculture along with hunting gathering. They have a number of such traditional conservation practices: sacred trees, heronries where birds are protected, sacred ponds, groves, lagoons. When you come to agricultural societies, then you have decline in these practices, but very interestingly, the kings in the agrarian societies all over, they maintain large hunting preserves where there is a quite good protection of both the wildlife and the forest. Kautilya's Arthashastra tells the kings about the need to maintain such Mrugaya Vanas. And if you look at Irfan Habib's Atlas of India, medieval India, I think 16th century, India, there is this big historical atlases.